Hey, sports history fans, this is Ariel Gonzalez from Wrestling with Heels On. Hey, when you go to a sporting event, you don't go there to be meek and mild, unless you live in Japan. You go there to get freaking wild. That means bringing some attitude to your amplitude. How do you do that? You get Racket. R-A-K-I-T. Racket combines a compact 7-inch megaphone, 8 powerful adjustable LED lights, noisemakers, an insert you design, and it's all fully customizable to match your team's colors. Now here's the coolest thing about this product. J.J. Abraham, the founder, was the ultimate cheer dad. He followed his daughter's cheer group around the country, and he saw parents struggling using all sorts of crazy contraptions to make some noise for their kids. And then he had an aha moment. He thought, wait, why not combine all of these doodads into an all-in-one compact device for the ultimate fan? JJ and his team worked 3 years on developing version after version after version until they finally landed on Racket, R-A-K-I-T, so you can make some noise and cheer and be a part of the action. So get out there and let's get loud. Bring a racket to your next game or competition to cheer on your favorite team or athlete. You can customize your racket with your own logos, drawings, and names. Get beads to match your team's colors. Flashing lights add to the excitement. Are you ready to make a racket? Be part of the game. Each racket pack comes with 1 racket megaphone, 1 lanyard to keep a hold of the thing, 2 scratch-resistant bead packs, 1 clear and 1 color of your choice, and a 10-pack of customizable self-adhesive inserts. Currently on sale, wait for it, $24.99. To pick up your racket today, head to myracket.com. That's myraket.com. Now get out there and make some noise.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
The Rose Bowl. The game that inspired the college football bowl season has a long and storied history. The stadium itself is 100 years old, and in celebration of it, Pigskin Dispatch is assembling some of the top historians and authors to share the memories, people, and events that make the granddaddy of them all the special game that it is. Enjoy this Rose Bowl memory from pigskindispatch.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And as we've been doing here for the last few days and keep on going, we are talking about the Rose Bowl. We have a lot of guests coming on talking about some different aspects of the Rose Bowl, some of the games, the players, some of the pageantry of this great venue that's 100 years old here in January 1st, 2023. And tonight is no exception. We have another great guest. We have R C Christiansen, author and historian that does a lot with different aspects of football. And he's going to bring some Rose Bowl knowledge to our heads tonight. RC, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, this is great. We talked to you a few times here over the last year, a lot about your Border Boys book. And maybe before we get into it, maybe you could share with the listeners a little bit about what the book is and where they can get their hands on a copy of it.
Sure. So if you visit borderboysbook.com, you can find out a whole lot more. But I guess in a sentence, it is about the American college players who really helped to change Canadian football back in the early 1930s. And so it follows the lives of those players and the first Grey Cup won by the West. And it goes into some of the history of the rules changes and the relationship with American football as well.
All right. And, so make sure you get a copy of that. There's, like I said, if you type in R C Christiansen into our search box of Pigskin Dispatch, you'll see a couple episodes where RC has kindly come on and shared some information from his book and from his own noggin of football history. And we appreciate that. So I guess it's not too far of a stretch to tie that into with your Borders boys. We're a few decades off. We're advancing in it, but you're going to talk about a game that's very near to that area and very near and dear to your heart. And I'll let you set up and start chatting about this.
Sure. Well, I wanted to talk about the 1962 Rose Bowl, which of course comes off of the 1961 college football season. And I am myself a University of Minnesota Golden Gophers fan. And I became interested in this particular 1961 season at one point, in part because of the quarterback for the Gophers in 1960 and 61 seasons was Sandy Stevens. And I had learned that he was the first black man to play quarterback at the University of Minnesota. And when I learned that he was the one that took the Gophers to their only Rose Bowl, I thought, well, hey, that's a pretty big deal. So I wanted to find out a little more. So I looked into it a little more. Yeah,
definitely. That is a great big deal, because it's not like you look down through all the Rose Bowl history and you see Minnesota popping up, like you do, like the USCs of the world. So this is a great opportunity that maybe you could tell us a little bit about how Minnesota was in the 1961 season.
Well, in that season, they were not the national champion that year, because they were the national champion in the 1960 season. But in the 1961 season, it was Ohio State that actually won the Big Ten Conference Championship. And so originally the Gophers weren't supposed to go to the 1962 Rose Bowl, but as the runner-up, they after Ohio State declined the invitation, I can't remember what the reason was, something about academics or something, but the Gophers said, yeah, we will play that Rose Bowl. And of course, the Gophers had played the Rose as the national champions and the Big Ten champions the year before. They were undefeated, and they played in the 61 Rose Bowl, and they played against the sixth-ranked Washington Huskies, but they lost to the Huskies 17-7. So now this was going to be their next chance then, a second time around for Sandy Stevens, and they would play then the UCLA Bruins in the 1962 Rose Bowl.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about Sandy Stevens, because that's really what drew you to this game and had you take us a little bit deep dive into the history of that particular team and this particular player. So maybe tell us a little bit about Sandy.
Okay, well, he's from Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and he was one of the first, quote unquote, national recruits for the University of Minnesota, and he was recruited kind of along with a collection of players, I think. I mean, for sure, Bill Munsey, who was a running back, and I believe it was his best pal as well. He also came along with Sandy Stevens from Uniontown, Pennsylvania. And then there was another running back, a big battering fullback named Judge Dixon, and he came from Clairton, Pennsylvania. And then in that mix there is Bobby Bell from Shelby, North Carolina, and they were all on that team, and so was Carl Eller as well. And so there were some pretty big names on that team when you're talking about Bobby Bell and Carl Eller.
Right? Yeah.
So yeah, that's where he came from, and it was significant because the coach at the time, Murray Warmath, said, "Hey, we're going to go national, and let's get some players from around the country." So he was an All-American, Sandy Stevens, and he was the first African-American major college All-American quarterback. Now, that's kind of with an asterisk, I feel, because Kenny Washington was also an All-American at UCLA, I think back in 1939, but he was technically a tailback. So if you're dealing with technicalities, then I guess you'd say that Sandy Stevens was the first. So, and so he and Munzie and Dixon, and then they had a good receiver named Tom Hall. They had a pretty good offense going. And let me tell you about that offense. It was kind of interesting. I actually watched film for a project that I was working on. And I was trying to figure out what is their formations that they're using. And so what they used was a split T formation, which people might, be familiar with. But they also used what was called a tight wing T offensive formation. So a tight wing T had 7 men on the line and 4 backfielders. And so there were two halfbacks left and right and a fullback. And so I was trying to figure out what are they doing there. And they would sometimes split out one of those halfbacks as a flanker and things like that. But it took me a while to figure that out because I wasn't looking at a pro set. I was trying to figure out what are they doing. But
so is it like the backs you're saying when you're saying a tight T, they were just in tighter quarters at the lineup. So a lot tighter splits is what you're saying.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So you would see them, lining up in more of a traditional T formation. But anyways, I'd have to look at a visual again, but if you look up tight wing T, then you'll see what they were doing there. It was different from what UCLA was doing because UCLA was using a single wing, and UCLA was not as successful against the Gophers on offense in that particular Rose Bowl game.
Okay. Well, maybe tell us a little bit about the UCLA team.
Okay. Well, UCLA, they had 2 quarterbacks, and if you look at their statistics, it looks like they both played in all of the games. So they both played in 11 games, and it looks like they were kind of, they actually had exactly the same number of yards passing. They each had. It was only 327 yards passing each. They're more of a running style. Passing back, but they're big time runners. So what they had was Bobby Smith and Mike Hafner, and it looks like Hafner had 703 yards rushing, while Bobby Smith had 639 yards rushing. And so between the two of them, they were pretty good on their feet. That's compared to, for the Gophers that season, Sandy Stevens had 533 yards rushing. But Sandy Stevens was much more of a passing quarterback because he passed for 869 yards in that season.
Yeah. Well, the single wing back in that era, that's great when you have 2 guys that can throw the ball because they would normally, sort of almost like a shotgun snap back to one of the backs, and you didn't really know who was going to receive the snap and some of those true single wings back in that era. So I guess that would probably explain why they had equal passing and almost equal running yardage because they probably spread the ball a little bit from the snap. So
Right. So it's kind of similar now when we have the RPO, right? You don't know who's keeping the ball. Well, back then you didn't know who was receiving the ball in the backfield. So.
Right. I think our modern look at single wing is what they call wildcat in the NFL, and pretty much who's going to get the ball because the back is directly behind the center who's not exactly with the quarterback. So that's the case in the single wing. I was officiating a game probably about 15 years ago at the high school level, and I really didn't understand what the single wing was. And the coach before the game, and it was a playoff game, so I had to go downstate, down by Pittsburgh and do the game. The coach said, "Oh yeah, we run the single wing." And I'm like, he goes, "Are you familiar with that?" I said, "Not really." So he starts telling me what they're doing, and it was exactly that. And it was a Black Friday that we did it. So it was a cold weather here in Pennsylvania with ice on the field, and these guys were snapping the ball all over the place. I'm in the backfield with the best view in the house, and I couldn't tell who was getting the ball. So pretty exciting offense to see a true single wing being run. So quite a work for it.
So that was the situation. And in that game, UCLA only scored on a field goal. They didn't have much success on offense, I suppose, against Bobby Bell and Carl Eller and others. And they only got that one field goal in the first quarter. And so the rest of the game, it was all Gophers. Sandy Stevens, he got a rushing touchdown from the 1 yard line. And Bill Munsey, he got a rushing touchdown from the 3 yard line. And then Stevens in the fourth quarter got yet another rushing touchdown. So it was all rushing touchdowns. But Stevens, he was 7 for 11 in pass attempts, but it was only for 75 yards. So, that he was actually pretty limited in his passing compared to what he had done during the regular season.
So it sounds like they were grinding that game out a little bit and, putting the ball in the hands of the running backs and just pounding the rock a little.
Yeah, I had read that it was actually decent weather, so it wasn't like they were playing in the mud or anything. So it must have just been a strategic choice there, I guess. So.
Yeah, probably, you want to take if you a potent offense like UCLA's coming in touted as, you want to keep the ball out of their hands. So running the ball eats some clock and, wears down a defense real good too. So I guess it was a pretty good strategy. So
when we, get to the end of the game, Sandy Stevens was named Rose Bowl Player of the Game. And of course, Minnesota won, and it's their only Rose Bowl win. And it's their most recent, appearance, of course, in the Rose Bowl. Now the Rose Bowl is, it's not like it was, right? With the Rose Bowl was, for about 50 years there, it was pretty much Pac-10 versus Big Ten. And of course, the earlier names of those conferences. And so the fact that Minnesota was only there for those 2 years in a row, that's pretty bleak for the Gophers.
Yeah, well, you have a couple pretty dominant teams in that conference over the years, and they hog all the glory, don't they?
Yeah.
Well,
and I just wanted to mention too, I mean, one of the curious things now then is, in 2024, UCLA and then also USC, they're both going to be full members of the Big Ten.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Well, yeah. And what's most interesting about it is the fact that, we had that relationship for so many years with the Rose Bowl, with Pac-10, Big Ten. And so, USC has been in the Rose Bowl 33 times. UCLA has been in the Rose Bowl 12 times. There's been a lot of Big Ten / USC or UCLA matchups over the years. It's going to be kind of fun having those two teams, playing against Big Ten teams.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll keep it sort of the East and West, and I'm sure USC and UCLA would be in the West and be playing maybe Minnesota every year. So that could be interesting too.
Yeah, it's supposed Minnesota play, one of them maybe every year. I wonder how they're going to do that, as far as balance and everything, if they'll shuffle anybody around. But yeah, I think it'll really add to the flavor on football for the Big Ten. So I also want to just touch on the professional careers now for these players.
Sure.
So
yeah, please do.
Yeah. So afterward, so Bobby Smith, he was drafted by the Los Angeles Rams, and he ended up playing 69 games in his career as a pro. I'd have to look back on whether he stuck with the Rams the whole time or not. I can't remember. But Mike, then the other quarterback for UCLA, Mike Hafner, he was with the Broncos, and I don't think he was drafted. He must have been a walk-on or something like that, because I don't see in his information that he was actually drafted. But so back to Bobby Smith, he was mostly a return man. So even though he had played in he was more of a running back with the single wing and everything. But he did mostly returns when he was a pro. And then, but Mike Hafner, they moved him out to wide receiver. And so he had 7 touchdowns and 991 yards in his career. So, neither one of them went on to become any kind of a quarterback type position. And then we were talking about Sandy Stevens. Now, Sandy Stevens was a different situation. He was actually drafted by Cleveland in the 2nd round, and if you look at the AFL, he was drafted by the New York Titans 5th overall, and so he was a fairly high draft pick with the NFL, but he chose instead to go to the CFL. So he played, and he alternated years here. He played in 1962, played with Montreal. Then he was with Toronto in 63, and then went back to Montreal in that same year, 63. But that was the extent of his career up in the CFL. So,
it could have been kind of interesting. He could have really changed football history if he would have chose to go with the Titans, who became the Jets and had any success. Maybe they don't get Joe Namath if they have a good quarterback on the roster already. So he might have changed football history by that decision.
Yeah, he was never. I guess I'd have to compare his numbers with Joe Namath, but he didn't have a real great completion percentage. He was kind of a little bit wild with his arm. So, if you look at his CFL stats, his completion percentage was 48.5%, which, in that era, it wasn't terribly low compared to other quarterbacks. But if you look at his completion percentage with the Gophers or at least in 1961, it was 35%. So we're talking pretty low percentages for completions for Sandy Stevens.
Yeah, the passing game in both college and pro football was a little bit different than we look at it today. It's it was basically a running offense. Offenses were structured around passing was sort of a little bit more secondary, where now we have probably more passing than running on average teams. So you got to look at the errors a little bit. So I wouldn't be too concerned with the passing percentage being a little bit lower. I think all of the quarterbacks were in that era. Well,
and I guess part of the reasons I focused on that so much is because I had, based on the 1961 season, I had created some cards for a game called Stratomatic Pro Football. If you're familiar with that game.
I used to play Stratomatic all the time when I was a kid.
Well, and I created the cards for the old version of Stratomatic, not the new version, right? So I'm talking about the big cards. So there was big cards back through, I think it was 1980 or 81, one of those two. And then we have the smaller cards nowadays, but I created these cards for the big card version of the game. And so I was dealing with the quarterbacks from that time and having lower completion percentages. And so I had to, reverse engineer how they made these cards. And when you look at his card in Stratomatic, you're like, oh my gosh, does he ever complete a pass? So, but yeah, it was a fun challenge to look at all the stats and figure out how to make these cards for Stratomatic. So I actually have a website where people can download these Stratomatic cards if they want. It's tnfclub.com. tnf.blogspot.com. And then when you get there, it says Tuesday Night Football Club. So tnfclub.blogspot.com. And the 1961 Big Ten project is the first thing you'll see when you get there. And I made cards for the 1961 Gophers, the 61 Badgers, and the 61 Hawkeyes. And so I've played a few games with these cards. I also had a few other people play games with these cards, and they're pretty darn accurate in terms of the kind of stats you get out of them. So they can be a lot of fun if you like old college football.
Very interesting. Now, how long does it take to do something like that to do a team, to do like let's say to do the Gophers in 61?
Oh, well, it actually took quite a bit. So I sent you a PDF, and you have to understand, I had to look at old newspapers, at old box scores, and to get all of the statistics, right? Because when you create Stratomatic cards, you need to know what was not only how, percentages, percentage completion or average yards per attempt, but you got to know, what kind of distances did they get, on a regular basis, right? Because they weren't like short little passes, right? They were usually passes back then. When they threw a pass, they were going to get, a good chunk of yardage. And so you had to check out all that. And I actually corrected some of the information that they had out there on Sports Reference for the 61 Gophers, because they didn't have, and even I think for the Badgers, because they had some of the information wrong out there in Sports Reference, and I submitted those, and they did make some corrections.
Wow, that's quite a laborious effort there, and I'm sure it helps you to learn more about the teams that you're interested in by doing that, and then going and doing the Wisconsin and Iowa too. That's quite a chore you had there. So hats off.
They had to have opponents. You can't.
Wow, right? That's true. That was my next question. I was going to say, who did you have them play against? But if you're having playing from the same era, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah. So
if you have them playing like last year's Alabama team or something, probably not so much fun.
Right. Yeah, that wouldn't be fun at all. So, yeah. Wow.
Well, very interesting. I guess, appreciate you coming on here and talking about this great Rose Bowl game. Definitely some great people that played in that. Did you have anything more you wanted to add to that, to the Rose Bowl stuff?
I tried to obtain a copy at one point of the game so I could actually watch that game. And unfortunately, I've never actually been able to watch the game. So, I'd probably have more to say about it if I was able to actually sit down and watch the game. Yeah,
some of those games from the early 60s, it's hard to get even on YouTube or any of the other websites that have some of the college games. You don't get much footage from them. So, and when you do, they're kind of grainy and very
they're highlights.
They're like a highlight reel. So, Well, very good. Again, why don't you share one more time where folks can find your book and go and buy the book for Christmas or, for a favorite football fan in their life.
Okay. Well, I encourage you just visit borderboysbook.com, because on there we've got information about the book. Also, I have some quotes on there from, former CFL players about the book. And then there's information about how to obtain the book from there as well. And it's an interesting part of history that I guarantee you're not going to get it anywhere else. So.
All right. I agree with that. So R C Christiansen, we thank you very much for sharing your football history and your research ability. And, with this 1962 Rose Bowl game with Minnesota and UCLA, and sharing a little bit about your research further on this team with the Stratomatic card. So thank you very much, sir, for helping us celebrate the Rose Bowl's 100th anniversary.
All right. Thank you. And have a happy holidays.
We're taking a peek over at the chains and the down marker. It's 4th and long. We're going to have to punt the ball and get on out of here, but we'll have another series tomorrow for your football history headlines, so be sure to tune in. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast. PigskinDispatch.com is a proud affiliate of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of sports yesteryear.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.